Okay, ready?
No, not yet, not yet.
Okay.
It takes maybe 20 seconds.
Okay, 1 minute anyway.
Take my candy out of my mouth.
And now I have everybody on a separate screen. That worked. First time I've seen double without alcohol.
Mayor, I think we're ready.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone. This is Isle Palms Special Emergency City Council meeting, Saturday, May 2nd at 3 p.m. approximately. This is our, I think, 7th virtual meeting. I appreciate everybody kind of bearing with us. We're learning as we go along here. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge both the press and the public were duly notified of this meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. And if we could have a roll call.
Councilmember Popson?
Here.
Councilmember Streetman?
Here.
Councilmember Bell?
Here.
Councilmember Ward?
Here.
Councilmember Pounds?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Buchanan?
Here.
Councilmember Moy?
Here.
Mayor Carroll?
And here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you very much. I just have to get my list of council members so I can make sure we do the questions right. We have called this meeting. Yesterday we had a surprise announcement from the governor who reopened vacation rentals. Didn't quite expect it to be as quick as it was, but it was, and hence here we are today. We are here to consider amendments to Emergency Ordinance 2020-04 and other measures proposed for the safety and public health of the city of the Isle Palms. I hope everybody has in front of them 2020-04. There were 9 thereas, and 2 of them had to do with things that we're going to be talking about today. Number 7 was the curfew, the checkpoints in the island that started at 7 to 7 and were switched to 8 to 5. The other thing that we are going to consider is the rental of short-term rentals, hotels, and other overnight accommodations. I think the first thing we should do is go to our legal brain to kind of give us a rundown on how she interprets everything that was said yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The governor had a press conference. We have been notified as of today that there will be no executive order in writing to follow. So we are left with the press release to try and figure out what he would like to see happening within the state. We do know that he has lifted all restrictions, even the 14-day quarantine requirement on short-term rentals, starting immediately. And then with the stay-at-home order, he has now issued that it be voluntary as opposed to mandatory. So that's what we're left with.
Okay, thank you. Hearing that, so the questions are, we've got 2 things. Number 1, we had no choice as for the vacation rentals. They are open for business as of Monday. But we do have abilities for requiring our management companies to follow a certain guideline. That's something we can discuss. But at the same time, the checkpoints are most important that we address. Is something that here we are, people who can afford to pay to come to Isle Palms are allowed to come to Isle Palms. But those who live here in Charleston County, Berkeley County, Dorchester County, and are not paying for a rental are prohibited from coming to the Isle Palms. So let's ask some questions. I think that would be better yet, do we have a motion to change the checkpoint hours? So we can have a discussion.
Mayor, you can have some discussion before
can
the
have some
motion is
discussion.
presented.
Okay, all right, so let's just do it like I did before. Our first couple times was alphabetical order. I'm gonna go in reverse. Councilmember Ward. Any questions?
No, I see your point about we're letting people that have the money to rent houses on the island, but we're not allowing our neighbors to come to the island. At the same time, we all must keep in mind what happened March 20th, and also learn from what Folly Beach did a few weeks ago, and they had to opened up the island for I think 6 hours and had to close it down. At this point, I'm just ready to listen to the other council members for letting people access to the island, but I'm just afraid that we're going to get overrun at this time, and so I just want to hear what everybody else has to say.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Streetman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, here's my thoughts on it. I have a lot of friends in Mount Pleasant and other neighboring communities all around Charleston and elsewhere. So I would love to be able to see them get back over here as soon as they can. But I share some of the same sentiments that Councilmember Ward just mentioned in regards to being overrun. Where I'm at right now is, we've got Olive Palms, Folly Beach, Sullivan's Island, and Edisto Beach, but particularly, Folly and Sullivan's who are our closest neighbors. All of us have restrictions. And it seems to me that there needs to be some ability or some way that we can just go ahead and coordinate so that we all open about the same time. Otherwise, we're all, if one of us opens first, we're gonna get overrun. We know that. So if we had it some way that we could, in concert with Sullivan's and with Folly, at least, to be able to open our access at the same time, I would be in favor of that. Otherwise, I think we need to keep some access restrictions in place for now and try to monitor the traffic and and make sure that we are not overrun. My other concern, and of course we might want to defer to Chief Cornett about this, is how do we handle a sudden influx of crowds when we do lift the access, lift the restrictions? So that might be something that the chief may want to weigh in at some point during this discussion and talk about what our plan would be if we do lift restrictions, or when and if we do lift restrictions. And I'd like to get his thoughts on that as well.
Councilman Streetman, those are great points. And believe it or not, Chief Cornett was going to be our last speaker on this. I wanted him to hear what I had to say.
Okay.
Then let him kind of come in here because I think it's important for him to hear each council member. But I rely mostly on our chiefs to guide us, just like we rely on our medical advice. But yes, you're right. We are going to rely heavily on our chief. Anything else, Councilman Streetman?
No, that's it. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Hilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that Councilmember Streetman made some great points. I think that we need to, there's strong sentiments on all sides here, but I'm seeing an increasing number within our community also asking that we ease restricted access. And so I can certainly see us moving towards that faster, perhaps by May 12th, opening up fully, or I should say not opening up fully, but moving completely away from our checkpoints and restricted access and considering other ways that we can keep traffic more controlled. For example, limiting our especially at Front Beach, the capacity of our parking lot. I think we need to be working with the county and talking to them about their plans for opening up the beach park, and also talking more with, especially with short-term rentals opening up. If we do not have a choice on that, we need to be really proactive in working with spots like the Harris Teeter and our marina, and making sure that everybody's prepared, and that we're being proactive and encouraging them to take measures that will help prevent spread. But I think we probably need to move in that direction of opening things up. And our governor really isn't giving us, he's not giving us much choice.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Pounds.
Comment earlier, and Susan, your comment just then about, the governor not giving us much choice. We shut down short-term rentals before he did. So I'm wondering why don't we still have that opportunity if this body wanted to? Yeah, I'm definitely anxious to hear from the chief. Totally agree with Rusty around some coordination of the barrier lines and making sure we, as much as possible, can act in lockstep with each other. So that's really, I'd love to hear some more conversation about the short-term rental comments and then see where we wind up at the end of the day, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Popson.
Federal task force is urging states to open up. Our governor just recently opened everything up. We have fellow states, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, I think coming soon to, open things up. And, we followed all their recommendations before by restricting, closing, limiting access. So I think it's just time to follow them again. It's really time for self-government, and people taking personal responsibility. If you're sick, stay home. If you're afraid, stay home. If you're at risk, stay home. Everybody else just needs to stay the proper distance. So I'm ready. I think it's time for opening the short-term rentals. When is a good time to open up the connector? Who knows? The masses are going to come. So I'm just assuming let's open it and see how it goes sooner rather than later. I do agree with, I think it was Rusty or somebody that said we really need to coordinate with Sullivan's Island, that, they don't get more harm or we get more harm by not opening the same time. And I think we need a little bit of time to get the chief and his staff and Desiree's staff just to make sure we have everything in order once we take the checkpoint down. And, do we limit some of the parking? I think Councilwoman Smith said, do we limit some of the parking like on Palm Boulevard, just to maybe ease the masses a little bit? But I'm ready for both.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Moy, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I see. Yes, sir. I can hear you. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you. I've got a few comments, and I won't restate everything that's been said by some of my fellow council members. But yeah, I'm anxious to hear from the chief. But I think we all need to recognize that this virus is still a very active problem, and all of the measures that we have taken to date have gotten us to where we are. So we're not at a place where the cases are declining. We're at a plateau, which is great. It's good news. That what that means is what we've been doing has been working. But I think it's incredibly important that we all acknowledge that and recognize that, the measures that what we're doing now is keeping us where we're at. And we're not, what we're trying to do is figure out how do we take the next steps forward in ways that are incremental, in ways that don't open floodgates, so to speak, and create a problem where we have a second peak. And from both a social and from an economic standpoint, that's the wisest thing that we can do, because if there's a second peak, whether that's in our area, in our state, or in our country, that's going to be very bad for us, again, both socially and economically. So That's the first point is we're at a plateau. We're not out of the woods here. The second point is, related to that, we have to keep social distancing. So regardless of what restrictions we start to ease, to Councilmember Popson's point, personal responsibility is still going to be critical. I am not so idealistic as to believe that enough people are going to take social responsibility. We have evidence in recent history on March 20th, as Councilmember Ward mentioned, and evidence throughout the entire country that there are going to be large swaths of people that will not follow social distancing. So what that means, because people are by and large will not, I'm sorry, I'm on dad duty. That's why I'm not on camera. So if you hear my daughters, my apologies.
Don't apologize.
But I'll keep going. Because we know that there's going to be people that will not follow social distancing, we know that we have to enforce it. And that's what our chief and our public safety officials have been tasked with. To date, we've been using the access checkpoints to ensure that social distancing is being followed by limiting the crowd size. Once we start opening up those checkpoints and once we start allowing short-term rentals, once everything starts, those restrictions start being diminished, which is great, which we all want. Everybody wants all of those things to happen as soon as possible, but we need social distancing to coincide with that, which means we need enforcement. And the fact of the matter is, we have a relatively small police force, and our police force was not built to mitigate the circumstances of a pandemic and to enforce the level of social distancing that needs to be enforced. And so I would say, first of all, we need to, if we're getting pushback from our neighboring communities and it doesn't seem like it's being done in the spirit of collegiality and trying to work as neighbors and work together, it sounds like it's political grandstanding. If they're going to be pushing on us like this, we need to turn back to them and ask them how they're going to help us enforce the social distancing that's necessary to keep them safe, to keep our community safe. And so I would ask our city administrator, I would ask our chief of police and our mayor to reach out to their leadership, to reach out to their mayor, to reach out to their city administrator and say, what are you going to commit to? Are you going to send uniformed officers to help us patrol the beach? Because if we're going to start reducing the access checkpoints, we're going to have a lot of people on the beach, and we're going to need to enforce to keep it in motion, and we're going to need to enforce the limit of 3 people per group. As it relates to, things that we can do, I agree with Councilmember Smith's point on parking. I think that's one area that was offered at the very beginning of the situation by the city administrator and by the chief of police as one option. We took the path of the access checkpoints, but there's certainly a lot that we should be looking at as it relates to incrementally opening the beach back up and reducing the amount of parking that's available to control crowds. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Buchanan. Ryan, your audio.
Better?
Better.
Got it. Okay. A lot of my questions are directed toward the chief and some of the other guidelines around that. Do we have an indication when, is my understanding that the governor is going to lift restrictions on parks and state parks here soon as well? Or are we aware of that, Desiree? Or when's that planned?
Yeah.
Oh.
Desiree, we can't hear
You're
you.
muted. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, some state parks are opening. Some were open on Friday,
Right.
Particularly to the park that is in our community.
Right.
So Bill Smith mentioned the county park. I have some communication with their manager, with Cynthia, and they're really waiting on our lead to open up their park. And we did talk about some of our suggestions to enforce social distancing by limiting parking in some areas. And they are willing and I think it's a great idea and something that they are willing to put in place in their park as well.
Okay. Another question I asked, I know that Councilman or Chair of Charleston County, Elliott Summey, has reached out to us and has mentioned he'll put officers on the beach. Chief, have you, it's part of my question is, or Desiree, what has Elliott or Sheriff Cannon approached us as for help and support for enforcement of the governor's mandates? Des?
Oh, I thought.
I said you were
Yes.
Chief. I wasn't sure if the chief was waiting towards the end or so I'll direct my.
Yeah, I know Chief has been in communication with Sheriff Cannon, so I'll let him answer that question.
Okay.
So we have talked with Sheriff Cannon and he has offered to assist us. The difference is that we're not, unless we're paying deputies, they're not specifically assigned to our island. They will help us and answer calls and patrol our beaches, which they have done as they're able to do so when they're not on other calls. The other option would be that we pay those officers off duty time the rate of $30 or more an hour to be on our beach. And the difference with that is that they cannot enforce any city ordinances. They can only do state statutes with that. So that was, but he has offered to send us people to help as they're able to do so. And I've communicated several times as the beaches have opened up and he's been willing to help us.
Correct. And I've seen officers, Charleston County officers out here today as well patrolling. But that would not be a problem for them to be on the beach because the I guess would be trying to enforce a state statute, the governor's order.
Correct. The social distancing, he could. They could come out and they could enforce those. They couldn't enforce the keep moving or any of the other violations that are city ordinances, but he could do, the deputies could enforce the social distancing statutes. Okay.
And a couple other things to follow up on. I know we have a lot of restaurants and businesses that are opening up here on the island, being so stay-at-home orders have been lifted, the restaurants, the government's lifted restrictions on restaurants. And as of Monday, I know a lot of people are going to start serving. What are we doing at the checkpoint to allow those businesses who need the business to allow them to get business from off island?
That's a difficult answer. So initially, when we first started this, we were allowing people with to-go orders to come onto the island to access those restaurants as long as they could show a receipt. However, it's not part of the ordinance that was passed by council to allow them onto the island. So that would be something that I would prefer to have some clarification on council as to what to do, because once they pick up food, we can't control where they go or what they do from there. But at the same time, we understand the necessity for our businesses to get those customers in and to get those purchases out.
Okay. And a couple other things. In the last meeting, we talked about in enforcement and the easiest way to enforcement and the best way and safe practices, the best safe practices that we want to utilize for our public safety. And you had mentioned that you felt it was safer for the officers to be on the beach patrolling and enforcing social distancing because they're only basically enforcing violators of that ordinance. Whereas at the checkpoint, they're theoretically checking everybody, whether they are going to the beach or not. Is that, do you still stand behind that, or is your impression?
Yes, sir. It's still safer when we can control the distance that we have with somebody when we're talking to them. At the checkpoint, most individuals, we've got a system that most people are able to put their IDs up, or they have the stickers on the vehicles, or they've got their business license and they've adjusted and they put them up in the window. But now we're seeing a larger number of people who are trying to get access to the beach that are currently not authorized through the ordinance. And that is forcing the officer to talk to those individuals when they show up and to hear their explanation and then turn them around and explain to them to turn around. So we're really forcing them to have more contact at the checkpoint than we would be on the beach. And that's where, when I talk about safety, that was the safer part is we can control the distance on the beach where we can't at a checkpoint.
Okay. And I guess my final statement on this is, we've all been kind of guided by both the federal and state legislatures and governments that theoretically what we've been trying to reach or trying to attain is flattening that curve. It seems now that if that was our goal, that goal line keeps getting moved. So now it's not are we not only reached flattening the curve or have plateaued, as somebody else had mentioned earlier, plateaued for some time, that now we've changed our directive to now we have to have a 14-day decrease in the number of cases. It goes up and down, it's like depending on when they're doing the testing. So, I mean, that's my biggest concern is I would love to see the business start to open back up and thrive again. But this whole moving of the goal line has been kind of confusing as well for folks. When you set a goal, you attain it, and then it just gets switched again. So I'll be curious to see if anybody else has questions for the chief or the administrator or the attorney, but to follow up on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Bell.
Yeah, and by the way, I appreciate all the comments. The question I did have, same as Councilmember Pounds, was regarding home rules since we started this before the governor took any action. Just a couple of comments. The most effective discussions I've heard across the board, from federal down through local, is when we put politics aside and listen to medical evidence. So whether it's the federal directives, those are phased approaches. We've not hit any of those goalposts yet. To Councilmember Buchanan's comments, of course the goals changed. We didn't know much about this virus when it started. The things that haven't changed are the concerns. And I just want to remind everybody, the median age on this island is 57. The population density is 980 per square mile compared to 165 for the state. And Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, the median age in Wild Dunes was around 68. So we have a much, much more difficult decision point regards to public welfare and safety of our residents than surrounding communities with median ages of 36 years old. Right, so for me personally, until I hear something from the medical community, sans any political views, local or otherwise, I don't understand how we can make a decision that doesn't put our residents first and recognize that we're all under political pressure to make these changes. But I'm not going to be that person looking in a mirror when all is said and done saying I made a bad choice. And to Councilmember Moy's point, I haven't heard anything from anybody around the world that doesn't believe that we're at risk for a resurgence of this virus. So we started with the medical evidence. I'm hoping this council ends on the medical evidence and takes politics out of it and starts making very good medically sound decisions. That's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief, if you don't mind, I'm gonna let you give us your big view on everything from the 7 to 7, any changes from the 7 to 7 to 8 to 5, opening, patrolling from the beach. Give us your big picture.
Gotcha.
And also,
So,
Chief Cornett, if you also talk about the experience yesterday when the first day of an 8 to 5 shift, that would be helpful.
I will do that. So overall, since we started I'll kind of try to start with some stats here. So we started the Keep Moving ordinance. Since we started that, we've given 154 verbal warnings on the beach for those violations. Yesterday, we gave 62, which sounds like a lot. But the reality is, when we had the beach restrictions in place for mostly just our residents, we still were giving about 40 to 50 warnings a day for those individuals for the Keep Moving. That's still a relatively new ordinance and several people not necessarily abiding by it. That's why we've had the 154 warnings with those. But with those, we've also had numerous warnings for dog leash violations and a lot of other violations on the beach here lately. So looking at it from the law enforcement side, we did see a lot of traffic yesterday. And if you looked at the camera right now for 517, you're going to see that there is a large backup on the connector almost to Mount Pleasant. We actually were experiencing with a drone on Thursday and put a drone in the air and we could see the traffic almost all the way to Mount Pleasant. And it was, it's a lot. But what we've seen, the reason we're getting so much more is that a lot of individuals were under the impression that they could come to the beach whenever they wanted to. So we're turning them around. Some of them are not necessarily from the low country. And so they didn't understand that our beaches were closed. And just before we got on, in the 5 minutes I was watching the camera before we started the council meeting, I saw numerous vehicles at the checkpoint that were being turned around and sent back across the connector to Mount Pleasant. If we opened the beaches, I think the best approach would be for us to have a coordinated movement with our neighboring agencies. The concern that I would have if we just decided to do it would be that we would be the only beach open, and we'd be inundated with individuals coming to the beach, and we simply do not have the personnel to address the issues that come with that. However, if we did choose to open the beach, and when we do, there are several things that we can put in place and that we've talked about putting in place to facilitate making that the safest beach community that we could, and trying to use parking to force social distancing through the parking. And to do that, we would close municipal lots, which we still have closed at this time. We would plan to close the land side of Palm Boulevard so that people could not park on that side. They could only park on Palm Boulevard on the beach side. And the reason for that would be if we can limit how many vehicles can park in one area, we limit the number of people that are on the beach in that area, which kind of forces social distancing through parking. And that was kind of our approach. If we decided to do that, we would need some time to put that in place. So if council was of the mindset to go ahead and ease the restrictions on the checkpoint, we would ask that give us another week. That would help us to get a good plan in place and get some items in place to get that set up. It would also give us a chance to really evaluate how the 8 to 5 is doing. We did see a lot of traffic yesterday after 5 o'clock. As I said, the municipal lots were closed, but most of Front Beach parking spots were taken up, and about 75% of the parking spaces along Palm Boulevard were taken up as well. So we would know if we were the only one to open that we would certainly have people here. We saw that yesterday, and I would like to evaluate that a little bit longer if we could. The other thing, I like the idea of easing the restrictions a little at a time. And the reason I say that is it helps us to coordinate personnel so that we can better address the situations as they come up. You know, there are things that are going to take place that I'm not even thinking about as we're sitting here talking about it. And I wouldn't think of them until we opened up and then they started. And those would be some of the issues that we would see and want to be able to address. If we ease into it, then we have an easier way to adapt our response to those issues. The other part that I would say after talking with the city administrator earlier, once we open the beaches, our plan in the police department is going to be a zero tolerance approach to parking enforcement and to violations on the beach. There will be no verbal warnings. There will be no warnings. Zero tolerance for violators at park and violators on the beach that are violating the social distancing or the keep moving. And we would do that because we would want people to understand that you're coming here. We're opening these up for all these people. But if we don't take strict actions in the beginning, then people will get comfortable and there will be more opt to commit those or violate those ordinances. So we would have to kind of be real strict in the beginning to really kind of force that to take place. And I think as the only other thing I would say is there will be traffic that would back up, and we have that now. If we open the beach, we're going to have more traffic back up. And I would tell you that my priority would not be traffic. My priority would be the beaches. So the traffic's just going to be there. I don't have the personnel to address both of those. So we would shift our priority to the area where we have the greater risk to our community, which would be on the beach where everybody's gathering. So that would be something to keep in your mind as we open or talk about opening these. Ideally, the best thing would be for us to work with our neighbors and for all of our beach communities to open at one time to ease the load that any one island would take. And maybe we could set a plan to work with them. I've been on the phone with Chief Griffin this morning, and we're kind of talking through some things. And, you know, he's got to have 2 checkpoints as it is during certain parts of the day. And that can be, we did it, and I know how stressing that can be on personnel. So keep in mind that the easiest way is for us to work with our neighbors to do it at one time. It helps us, it helps them, and provides for a safer community because we don't have as many people in one area as we would if we just opened without their support. I guess that take questions.
I'm actually going to give our public safety personnel, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to reverse our roll call and ask Councilman Bell, do you have any questions for the chief?
No, I don't really have questions. I actually, frankly, appreciate the honesty and the logic behind it. I think we've all got to be completely aware that, you know, we have a relatively small public safety force here, and I don't think the other communities are looking at the fact that we can't afford to have officers sick. And I would stress the point again that Chief Cornett made. You know, if we intend to keep, you know, the motion going at the beach and other things, that there are no other surrounding agencies, as I understand it, that can assist with that. So you're going to have your hands full. And, I think we've got to be very thoughtful. And I think we've also got to coordinate with the other communities. I don't see how any single community can do this alone. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Councilmember Buchanan.
The chief went through and already directed or answered a bunch of my questions already. But you had mentioned that you think it'd take about a week to get anything in order, to get the parking arrangements, whatever the guidelines that you had mentioned earlier. I mean, if we were to open it, you'd say it'd take about a week to do it.
Yes, sir. And the reason for that would be if we just said don't park on the landslide or landside, we know what would happen. When we have signs everywhere tell people not to park, and they park there. So we would have to put something in place to prevent them from parking there, and maybe even borrow personnel from the rec center or from Public Works or some of these other departments within the city to help us to maybe put personnel on Palm Boulevard to tell people not to park there, because it's people do what they're used to doing. And if they're used to coming and parking on the land side of Palm Boulevard, that's what they're going to do. And so we have to kind of do something to enforce a change in their mindset so that they understood they couldn't park there. And that's going to take equipment and personnel, and just really to get the plan solid in place with as little hiccups as possible. I would ask at least until Friday if we could do that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I do want to add, not only the operational challenges of implementing that, Chief and I talked earlier about putting together a group of other folks from other departments to help, and that will take time. We can coordinate it through the week. So give us some time, the other municipalities, to have their discussion, for us to maybe send or have an indication of what the will of this is, and try to coordinate with Sullivan, particularly with Sullivan. They have a meeting Monday evening. So we will know quickly early in the week what their plans are. And hopefully within a week, we can come up with a joint plan.
Thank you, Desiree. Councilmember Moy.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chief. I don't think we can say it enough. I'm going to restate what I heard from you to make sure that I'm interpreting everything correctly, and then I'll have a question. But what I've heard is you recommend that we keep in place the current access restrictions that we have from 8 to 5 for at least a week, and that as we think about starting to roll back, whatever rolling back looks like, that you'd like to start putting together a plan for what things would look like if your police force was entirely dedicated to enforcing social distancing on the beach versus the checkpoint. You need at least a week to do that. Similarly, or additionally, you want to ensure that we coordinate with the islands. And this is, I guess, maybe my question. How important is it, do you think, that we coordinate with Sullivan's Island and Folly Beach? In other words, if Sullivan's Island and Folly Beach say, you know what, we're keeping access restrictions through the end of May, and this council has the will to open up sooner, how much more time would you need to plan, and what additional concerns would that raise for you?
So thank you. Those are good questions. And the time frame I really think would be the same. I don't think we would really change much operational. We would just prepare for a larger group of individuals. That would be the concern if we did not open in coordination with those other islands. If they're still closed, there's nowhere else to go except to our island, which will be quickly overrun and traffic will be quickly backed up. And again, as the traffic backs up, my main concern won't be traffic. It will be the beaches and the areas where everybody are gathering. So that's why that coordination is so important. I will say Chief Griffin has just as much riding on this as we do, because whatever we do is going to impact him and his crew. And he and I talked, like I said earlier, and I know he wants to work together to open this up at the same time, so that the cities are on the same platform, because it's going to hurt us. And they're going to be tied up on their checkpoints. They wouldn't be able to send personnel over. And I know we could ask mutual aid, but the other part to remember is we won't be the only place that's easing restrictions. Even Mount Pleasant, they are dealing with the restrictions that are being eased from the governor. And with that, they're going to see more people on the roadways. They're going to see more activity. That activity will lead to more calls for service. So they may not have the personnel to send us to assist on the beach. So that's the reason that the coordination between the islands is so crucial, because if we don't, whoever opens first is going to be overwhelmed with people.
Before we go on to, John, I'm sorry, you still speaking?
No, I just said understood.
Thank you.
Chief.
Before we go on to Councilmember Popson, let me reiterate that our communities are speaking. The mayors are speaking. The administrators are speaking. If you remember last week when I did a straw poll to our council members, it was the same time that Mayor O'Neill was doing the same thing with his council. That's why that straw vote was taken. We were trying to coordinate, and what council members said to their mayors on both islands ended up being different, even though we were all trying to coordinate together. Desiree has been in contact with administrators on Sullivan's Island and Mount Pleasant. And I think she had an answer from one asking about assistance on Isle of Palms, and it was more of a laugh as opposed to no. Desiree, am I correct in saying that?
I think that they're going to have their own challenges, when lifting those restrictions, and I don't know how many folks are going to have to be able to send. I mean, I think we're all going to be struggling with the same issue. So if other municipalities would be able to send assistance, I think that would be great. But I think the city would have to be prepared to enforce and manage our own restrictions and our own regulations with the force that we have. Can't really depend on getting assistance from anybody else, unfortunately.
Well, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we have been communicating on a daily, if not multi-daily basis. And with Mayor O'Neill, what he thought he had was totally taken away from him. What he thought he had for a majority for a vote. So again, that's called politics. Things change. So, but there is communication taking place constantly amongst all communities. Let me move on to Councilmember Pounds for Chief Cornett.
Popson or Pounds?
I'm sorry, Popson.
All right. That's all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have any more questions for the chief. I mentioned before, and I totally agree with, limiting the parking and coordinating with our fellow beach communities. I think it's vital. And then we're probably good or bad going to have community policing. You're going to get called. The chief's going to get calls from people, pointing other people out that they're not 6 feet apart. So we're going to get some community policing, maybe even some of the business owners. But anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just to respond to Councilman Popson, we do have people calling, and we love our residents that are calling to let us know where the issues are taking place. And the hope would be that our communities would kind of self-police. So, you don't always have to have a police officer come out and tell you to move. And sometimes it's just somebody educating them on the statute of, hey, you're supposed to really be moving, but we would never, while we want them to call, we don't want them to interact in an aggressive manner. But they are calling, and we encourage that. Call us, and let's be a community and work together to solve an issue.
Kevin, I'm sorry about I'm making marks through the names as I go down my list. I just forgot to put a line in there. Councilmember Pounds now.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Thanks for your comments. I hope we hear you loud and clear when we come to a vote. Because and we've got 3 levers really for you right now: the checkpoint, the keep it moving, and the social distancing, right? And if we can take away 1 or 2 of those, to me, it seems like it would help the enforcement, and your staffing levels. Your comment about needing another week, we've got an ordinance on the table or on the books right now that ends on May 12th. I don't know why we don't just leave that as is, give you guys a week and a half essentially to figure out what we do when we open, hopefully coordinate with Sullivan's and Folly. And, again, I think we need to revisit the keep it moving on the beach personally, and, get your enforcement and patrol, to maybe a singular focus to some degree. Just my opinion. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Pounds. Councilmember Hill Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, a few things that come to mind. One is that when we return back to removal of the checkpoint, I would suggest that it be on a weekday, maybe on a Monday, whatever day we pick. And then also, I'm curious to know, as far as staffing, we had agreed, at least in a budget sense, that we were in the middle of some kind of hiring freeze. Can you refresh on where you are with positions for both beach safety officers and your regular patrolling officers?
Certainly. So right now with beach service officers, we have 5 that have been hired. One is out for a family reason. The other one that has been out is returning Monday or Tuesday. So that'll put us at 4 that are operational to assist. We have 1 vacancy to fill as a patrol officer. 2 are full that we brought on, but they are not certified police officers yet. I'm sorry. They're not police officers yet and are awaiting the academy. We have utilized them to kind of help with some of the BSO position as we've gone through the beginning of the stages. Other than that, we do have a detective shortage and a captain shortage, and then 1 patrol officer vacancy. That those 3 are 100% vacant with no personnel added for those.
And are those positions that we can hire for, according to what maybe our administrator can refresh? Like, are we in position that you have the authority to fill those vacant positions?
Yes.
So we have talked about,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
That is correct. But freeze for all positions was meant to be flexible in terms of law enforcement and what was deemed essential. For this summer, our main focus is BSOs and having enough people on patrolling. So we do have 2 BSOs that went through the hiring process, and I think that they're, we almost already ready to go to hire them. And we had already had some conversations about at what level of staffing do we feel like we need to be for Chief Cornett to be comfortable for the time when we do lift some of these restrictions. So I think that, we can start by opening up those 2 vacancies for BSOs and staffing that up a little bit. And I think, went from our conversation that felt at this point.
Well, I think that
So we could certainly do that.
Okay. I mean, I think I would advocate that we make sure that we're proactive on staffing to make sure that we're ready to handle this, and that there will be a lot of value that we will realize in being able to control the situation as best as we can. And then it would be great if there's some creativity in how Mount Pleasant Police might be able to assist us, although recognizing that they're going to have their own strain. But certainly, if this is an important issue to them, that if there's any way that they can lend a hand, whether it's on our side of the connector or theirs, maybe there's some things to explore there. I am curious because it's been suggested that is there a role and a more official role that volunteers could play in terms of the enforcing the social distancing thing, or is that unrealistic to think, or potentially could create its own set of issues if we tried to look at that from the chief's perspective of, could you think about a volunteer group spreading the message about social distancing and keep it moving? What do you think about that?
I'm a huge favor of volunteers and getting a kind of a citizens police academy type thing in place where those people help. I don't know that we would have the resources right now to bring them in, properly vet and train them to help us in the best capacity. But I think regardless, that is something we should look at. We have a lot of residents that I think want to help and want to give back and want to be those eyes and ears, and can be done. But anybody that we're using to help us, we have to vet, because there have been situations, I'm sure you go back to somewhere, the citizens who were helping have taken it further than they should have and resulted in some issues. And we certainly don't want to find ourselves in one of those types of issues, but I want to explore that further. And I think it's something we could do.
And maybe it just comes to mind that maybe it's a role that someone could play as a monitor who can easily get in touch with police to alert you if there's a problem without them coming into contact with people or taking it upon themselves to advise other citizens about what they should be doing. I think we'll just need to think creatively right now and be open to ideas, but also be realistic. So, we'd still have 1,200 cases every week in South Carolina of coronavirus. So we plateaued, but we still have a high number that we need to be aware of. So I just would also encourage our businesses, our rental property owners, both to be very proactive in their own practices as far as cleaning and that kind of thing, but also in the messaging that they're giving to our visitors about what the restrictions are. And especially as we transition and those might change, that they make sure that they're giving good information and advice to people who are going out to the beach about what our laws are. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I did want to say, I think we could use the neighborhood watch program that we've kind of already started doing with the community meetings, and kind of get some people there that feel comfortable talking to us. That's easy. I've done that before. That's something we could incorporate, and kind of they're just the ones reaching out to us and advising us of things. That's easy. And if somebody's interested, we'd love for them to contact us. So if they contact anybody on council wanting to kind of have that, please direct them to myself.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, I hope everybody remembers we're all in this together, whether it's, neighboring municipalities or actual neighbors. And so that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Council Member Streetman. Rusty?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I was taking myself off mute. Desiree is probably taking me off mute at the same time. So, well, just a couple of things. Number one, Chief Cornett, I think you and your team are doing a fantastic job. And what I've heard, the questions you've answered, you've got a really good plan coming together. And I really want to see us respect your request to have some additional time to put all that together. A couple of things that I did want to clear up, or for clarification for myself, in regards to the BSOs that we currently have on staff. Do they have the ability to ticket on the beach? I know they could do the parking violations, but if they spot something on the beach that needs to be taken care of, do they have the ability to ticket?
They have the ability to issue a municipal summons for certain types of ordinances. We'll let them make contact and issue a ticket for those types of things. And then we teach them that should you have an issue, you break free, you call a sworn police officer to come in and take it further from there. But we really try to limit what all they're writing tickets for. But they can write municipal summonses.
Okay, fine. Another thing, and Desiree, I think this is probably more directed towards you. We were talking a little bit earlier about the parking plan and particularly about the county lot also. And I think you mentioned, Desiree, that the county was going to follow our lead on this. So does it look like that if we make a decision to start allowing more access, that the county is going to go ahead and immediately open that parking lot, or would they do that sooner?
Yeah, I think that they would do it with our checkpoint hours. Once we lift those checkpoints, that they would open their parking. We have talked about our plans to limit parking on our municipal lots, and they thought it was a good idea to force social distancing through parking. But they have not shared any specific plans, but we do keep in constant communication. And our plan would be to coordinate with them and coordinate with their staff so that we could do it jointly.
Okay, so we'd have the same social distancing sort of rules in place for both lots?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and then the parking on Palm. So we're talking about the recommendation is parallel parking on the beach side of Palm from basically 21st to 40th, where it is now, and then on the landward side of Palm from 42nd to 57th. Is that correct?
That is correct. And between 42nd and 57th, there's already no parking on the ocean side because it's a sidewalk. So the only side that we have parking available would be the landlord. So yes, that would be the plan proposed.
Okay, all right. And I guess my last observation is, being in the retail industry for many, many years, one of the things we're going to need to do as we look at opening up and that sort of thing is we've got a beautiful little supermarket over here on Isle of Palms, Harris Teeter, and it's been well stocked, I've got to say, and I've made frequent trips there, but we need to give them a heads up in time, with plenty of time, because once access is lifted and we move forward with allowing more visitors to the beach, more short-term rentals, that sort of thing, that supermarket's going to get beat up pretty badly. They're going to need daily deliveries on a lot of different items. So maybe multiple deliveries. So anyway, that's my only comment there. So we just need to make sure that our retail community, of course, restaurants and supermarkets, pharmacies and all that are very well aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah, there are plenty of things that we need to coordinate other than the police department type of situation, short-term rentals or hotel, students community association. So I think it was Councilmember Pounds who talked about our current ordinance expiring on May 12th. That would be ideal to just gives staff 3 more days from Friday, or 4 more days from Friday to get that done. So certainly at a minimum 7 days, a full week. But it's up to the will of council.
Okay, and one last thing, because this just came in, I just noticed that I got a couple of messages here from really a business owner on the island, and I won't go into specifics on that other than to say that they have volunteered to be part of the group effort, to help police everything as much as possible, whether it be through beach service officers if possible, or some sort of coordinated effort. And so anyway, that's something I think that businesses here on the island may be willing to do as much as they can as well. Thanks.
Councilman Streetman, just so you know, I talked to Elliott Summy last night, and they are trying to work with us. They are holding off opening the county park, watching what we do. Sullivan Zone is watching what we do. And to open the county park, they still have to train everybody, hire employees, lifeguards, and things like that. So whatever we do that delayed is going to be required for everybody. And I keep on talking about and hearing the date, the 12th. That's probably a date where everybody has time to do everything properly, to limit our parking and stuff like that. Council Member Ward, I believe you are up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just 2 thoughts after listening to everybody. I really appreciate the chief's input. Looks like to me that today we don't need to take any action on anything. Just let the governor's order stand, and we got our ordinance that's in place till May 12th. Give the police chief time to get everything ready to make changes. And secondly, most importantly, is that whatever we do in the future, we need to make sure we coordinate with the other communities, Folly Beach and Sullivan's Island especially, since this has seemed to have worked so well during this trying time. I think that's of paramount importance that we keep up coordination with them. And no action today. Thank you.
Okay. Chief Graham, there's no way I'm gonna let you sit there and not give us your input for our fire department. Would you give us an update and your feelings?
Our biggest thing is once the beach starts getting packed and the houses are packed, the short-term rentals and the property owners all alike and the businesses, our call volume will pick up. We will continue to treat people as if though they have something that we don't want and continue to use personal protective equipment. So we just may need to restock more often than we had planned. But right now we have a pretty good stock, but we could go to somebody with a jellyfish and we could be wearing a mask and gloves and a gown. We're not taking any chances with our personnel.
Thank you. Donnie, I'm not gonna let you out, and nor am I gonna let Norma Jean out. So Donnie, do you have anything you need to add for where we're at?
I don't have anything else to add. I mean, we're business as usual. And whether they're empty or not, we still check every house on the island. So business as usual for Public Works.
Thank you very much. Norma Jean.
We're, as you know, going to do our phase 1 opening on Monday morning. I think we're prepared for that. We're a little bit excited about it, to see people back on the grounds. And whatever we can do, Chief Cornett, to help you, by all means, call on me, and we'll be here to support the efforts of the island and whatever council's wishes are.
Thank you very much. And then again, as for Desiree, she has been putting together something to reach out to all of our local businesses so we can kind of work on this in a phased in fashion. Unfortunately, we got that news yesterday, so it kind of sped up our process there. We are going to be reaching out to all of our local businesses, stores. Rusty talked about the Harris Teeter. I look at the pharmacy. I look at the meat department. I look at Simmons Seafood, the liquor store. I mean, all these, I hate to call them needed services, but they are needed services. But they also need to be aware of where we're at and what's coming down the pike, so they can be ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we did prepare a draft. We've been working on a document with some measures and safety guidelines, CDC, and the Restaurant and Lodging Association, and we'll be sharing that with our stakeholders just to help them out as much as for them, providing best practices and helping coordinate some resources for them as they prepare for a phase reopening as well.
Okay. So we are back to that point about number 7 and number 8 as for the rentals.
Mayor Carroll, could I add one other thing?
Yes, sir, you can.
Thank you, sir. One thing I meant to bring up on parking, and it's remiss on my part that I didn't bring it up because I've had a number of communications about this, is as part of our parking plan, and we've talked about the lots at Palm Boulevard, that sort of thing, but we have those short streets, 3rd Avenue to 9th Avenue, that we also allow parking. And of course, we know we don't have any parking on Ocean on that side. We really need to take that in consideration as we come up with a parking plan, because those short avenues from 3rd to 9th, they really get slammed. And when we reopen, it's going to be a real mess there. So we at least ought to give that some consideration if we can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Somebody asked earlier about rentals, and basically based on what the governor did yesterday, rentals are open as of Monday. I don't think there's anything we can do, even under home rule, to control rentals. Julie, am I correct in saying that?
The governor's order yesterday was actually short-term rentals, no more restrictions from his office effective immediately. So not even till Monday.
Okay.
And if you guys wanted a discussion about preemption and implied preemption, we can certainly have a discussion in executive session.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just question on that, and I don't want to go into executive session. How did we do it the first time? I mean, to Councilman Pound's point, we had a long discussion around the risk, and we said we felt we were able to do it, and there was no government or governor's order in place, yet we didn't. Would that same logic still apply if we chose to?
It certainly would. There's a wrinkle that I'd be happy to talk to you guys about in executive session.
Not asking for that. We do lots of that.
Understood.
Okay, if we're going to rentals, how about parking and the checkpoints? I think we've heard from everybody here. Kevin.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I just want clarification. So we do not have to take any action today on short-term rentals?
No, sir.
Okay. They're open as of the governor's order.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as for the checkpoints, we have a date of the 12th where that expires. That probably gives everybody plenty of time to put plans together to think about limiting parking, as Rusty was saying, on the lower avenues, Palm Boulevard only on the ocean side, our main parking lot, cutting that in half. That's our own way of kind of forcing social distancing to help our chief and public safety personnel on the beach to kind of keep the numbers and spread out a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Mike.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I'm unclear on, and I couldn't hear you just now, Mayor. Is the plan to not have the main lot open and have the smaller lot open, or what exactly are we thinking about in terms of our parking lot, the municipal parking lots?
This is what we're discussing. We're discussing if we open back up and take the checkpoints out, how do we want to open up it like we were before, or do we want to force social distancing by limiting the amount of parking all over the island?
Right. But I wasn't clear, and the chief mentioned, it sounded like he might have been saying to just close the main front beach parking lots. And I wanted some clarification on what's under consideration as far as the front beach municipal lots.
Chief?
Certainly. So we could do two approaches. I think maybe first we try, you could either try closing both municipal lots and see how Front Beach does, or maybe the other approach, if you're not comfortable with that, is we cut municipal lot B in half and only allow half of that parking lot, because that's a large parking lot. And really municipal lot A, that's the small one behind the public safety building, that's already cut in half anyways because of the construction of the public safety building. So those two, it's already in half. If you wanted to do half of muni lot B or close it all together, I think we can facilitate either way. We would just need to know what you want us to do so that we can coordinate it and shut it down so that it's less likely to be violated.
I would think that using municipal lot B, cutting it in half, would make more sense than removing it out of the equation altogether. And that happened, I think we would just find ourselves in a traffic nightmare potentially if we're allowing people on but not really providing any spaces to speak of. However, we do have the county park to consider, and what measures they might maybe they could consider doing a halfway, cutting their lot numbers in half as well to provide balance, I guess. Is what I don't want to see is a lot of people coming on the island and then having to go search for a space all up and down the streets. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Councilmember Bell.
Yeah, I just suggest we don't solve here, leave the city a chance to come up with a plan, but just a thought. Part of the goal here is spreading people out, right? One approach obviously is move everybody into the municipal lots, but I just want to remind everybody of old conversations prior to the new members on council from roughly, the Citadel down to 57th, even though all the signs say beach access parking, it's hotel construction parking right now. And I don't know that we have to continue to allow that. We have an opportunity when the city looks at a parking plan to spread people more effectively, because right now our entire parking is almost contingent on 21st to 42nd Avenue.
Councilmember Bell.
I'll leave that, leave that with city administration. But it's been an ongoing conversation for a couple of years.
Talk to our city attorney on that aspect. I believe that's Highway 703. I don't think we can actually control saying that the contractors can not park there or can park there. Julia or
The
Yeah.
code is written as such for beach access, so I've looked at it pretty intently. It just, and the discussions in real property going back a couple of years were, is either real property or public safety. I was on both at the time, but the discussion was, we don't know whether they're going to the beach or not. I think it's pretty clear with the lunch boxes and the arrival times where they're going. So I would ask, we don't have to solve it, that the city attorney look at it and see whether that's something that could be discussed within a plan.
Yes, we have looked at it. We have received questions from residents from that area on that issue. And we have looked at the definition of beach access or beach parking as part of that ordinance. And it just says public right-of-way parking, although I guess some folks would say that the intent is beach access, but it's just public right-of-way. So there's no way for no mechanism for the police department to enforce if somebody parks there and then walks to the beach. So that's why the definition for public parking is pretty broad. I will say,
Lowe's Corporation to abide by this while we get through this.
Yes, we can certainly take a look at that. Mayor, we do need to take action on the short-term rental. Currently, our emergency ordinance 2020-04 fixes them. Well, so it would be just for clarity and consistency, it would require an action from council striking that section, which would be 8 of emergency ordinance 2004. And also considering amending the access restrictions to include hotel guests and short-term rentals. Short-term renters were included in the first ordinance, emergency ordinance 2020-01, but they were removed after the short-term rental restrictions were in place. So we would have to add those to the criteria.
Desiree, on that, I believe we had a thing about sanitation hygiene measures concerning rentals. I think if we take action, that needs to be included in there.
Certainly, yes. We could include, short-term rentals will be allowed, but they will be required to comply with, CDC guidelines and some of the other guidelines that the Restaurant and Lodging Association put together. I sent you all this morning on that, and we could certainly include that as part of the ordinance.
Would anyone like to take a stab at making a motion on this?
Yeah. Hey, Mayor, real quick.
I'd still like.
All right, one at a time, please.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thank you. I still am unclear as to the question that Councilmember Pounds posited earlier as to it. It sounds like the governor reverted back to a state, around to the state that we were in March 20th. And if there's new information that we need to receive in an executive session from our legal counsel, I for one would like to hear that if it's going to impact, if we're talking about making a change. I'm still unclear as to how we're in a different state than we were before, which to me would necessitate further discussion from this council. I'm not, so yeah, I don't know if I need to make a motion to move into an executive session. If Julia, it sounded like you were recommending, that's what you were recommending if we wanted additional information from you. Is that, did I hear you correctly on that?
I think that was an affirmative. Okay, Councilmember Pounds, was there a follow-up question?
That's exactly where I was headed. If we're going to take action on the rentals, I think we ought to go into executive session and have a conversation because I'm not sure I'm ready to lift that one personally.
Okay, before we go to that one, let's talk about the checkpoints. Is there anyone who would like us to make changes in the checkpoints or to extend it out as it is to the 12th and with limited parking?
Mr. Mayor, we have the restaurants that will start opening up on Monday to food and bev. And as long as we're going into executive session, That's one of the questions I would have to ask my attorney too. I mean, how liable are we if we're not allowing people to come over to, I mean, we're basically putting a burden on businesses by not allowing certain folks to come over and to use these businesses. So we're going to that. Also, you know, the governor lifted the stay-at-home order. It's voluntary right now. So I don't know what it's going to take. While it has to be phased, we need to get our ducks in a row. The chief mentioned, you know, how long it would take for him to get, you know, parking and those things, you know, in place. We need to do that, but the governor lifted the stay-at-home order, and I think that's one of the things that we need to lodge by.
Thank you very much for saying that. Anyone else?
I do.
Yes,
Mayor.
sir.
Yes, just a quick question in regards to the access restrictions and the traffic. Since we're having huge backups on the connector, we've all seen the social media postings. We've seen the you know, the cameras, that sort of thing. Is there any way? This was brought up by one or two citizens that I've talked to recently. Is there any way to have sort of a speed lane, a speed pass, so that we can at least have, you know, residents and people who are coming on, you know, workers, residents, and have them in the fast lane so that they're not slowed down that much? Or is that impossible to do?
Chief, that's you, buddy.
I'll be the bad guy and say, I get where they're coming from. The traffic, it does stink, and especially this week, it's gotten worse. But there really just isn't the room there for us to safely stand out and check everybody coming through if we had two lanes coming through. If it was a little bit wider, we probably could, but we're doing it where we are so that we've got space to turn around where we can see people do that U-turn when they're being turned away. So we really can't move from where we're at, which means we can't safely do two lanes.
Okay, well, I lived here like a lot of people did when we put the connector in. I guess we should have thought of that and widened that connector just a little bit. So.
Get your bicycle out, Rusty.
So, while we're still on that same subject, which is a great question, Rusty, as vacation houses now are opened up, they have to provide proof of rental. So that's going to open up our public safety personnel at the checkpoints, where they now have to walk around, roll down the windows, and show them the paperwork saying I'm staying with such and such company at such and such house. So our public safety personnel are going to be more exposed in the close proximity as they roll down the windows, and that cold air runs out the windows into our public safety personnel space.
That's making an assumption we open up for rentals though, right?
That's
I
making.
make a motion we go into executive session and have that discussion.
I think we're probably at that point now where somebody should make a motion.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll second.
In accordance, for the record, in accordance with section 3040A2 to receive legal and short-term rentals?
Yes, all that stuff.
Awesome. Okay, good.
Okay.
And Desiree, before we go out, I mean, I know when we close this down, people are not going to be able to sign right back into the same. So they're going to have to realize that they're going to have to go through and look for the new.
Yes.
Post. Yeah.
So Ron Hanna is on call. He's watching the video. I will let him know as soon as we are out of it.
1 second, Susan.
And we will keep and put on social media the new link so that people can join us again. So if folks that are watching can stay in tune with our social media, our Facebook page, we will give you all a 2-minute heads up so that you can log into the new live stream link. Thank you.
Councilmember Hill Smith.
I think the restriction, I would like to be able to discuss in executive session, not just short-term rentals, but also legal ramifications of our other decisions concerning the checkpoints and also business owners that are not short-term rentals, but are restaurant owners.
That'd be part of the parking aspect. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor, let's do a roll call vote, please. I guess we could do this on this one pretty easy by saying aye.
No, Nicole, the clerk will do a roll call.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Popson,
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman,
Aye.
Councilmember Bell,
Aye.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Pounds,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Buchanan,
Aye.
Mayor Carroll,
Aye.
all in favor?
Unanimous. We are now going into executive session. Before you say anything, just make sure we go offline.
Off the record at 4:18.